I always tell you, or I've been trying to, the last few weeks, tell you where my sermons come from, the ideas. And, a few weeks ago, I talked about secular humanism because I just said how there's a philosophy that sort of permeated our society and how that philosophy has denigrated the Scripture. It's denigrated the Bible and the God of the Bible and Jesus Christ. And it's in everything. I mean, it's not just one group, or it's just permeated everything. And then I gave a sermon on predestination because I'd actually had some people ask me in the congregation, would you give a sermon on predestination? So I did. Then last week, I gave a sermon on the mark of the beast because someone had mentioned some things happening on Facebook, and I started doing some research just on all through the internet, on different blogs and different religious sites, and boy, it was just exploding with the mark of the beast, and what it is. And there were ideas all over the place, so we went through the mark of the beast. Well, the inspiration for today's sermon, because I had a different sermon I was planning, came from our electrician. He was over the house. My wife, let's just say when there's electrical work to be done, she begs me not to do it, okay? And there's good reason she begs me not to do the electrical work. So the electrician was there, and I'm up in my office. I hear him come in, and he's going through the house, and she does this all the time when the plumbers, the electricians, she walks around with them and they tell her what she's doing. It's so interesting. She has questions, and pretty soon, they're just talking, and I'm thinking, I hope he's not charging me by the hour, and she's going all the place, and I can hear them talking, and he's explaining this and explaining that, and then they're talking about kids and grandkids and this and that and the other, and it just goes on. And then as they were getting ready to leave, I walked downstairs and say, goodbye to him. And they were talking about just how crazy the world is and how you can't trust anybody. You can't trust any politicians. You can't trust even the medical field. Everything's crazy. No one knows what's going on, and they're going on and on. And so he starts talking to me. And he goes on for a ways, and then there's that perfect moment that I've talked to you about before. I just love it when I say, well, I'm a Christian pastor. And of course, then there's this, oh no, it's this look like, and I said, I believe there's, we start talking about the Bible some, we start talking about the Bible. And he started talking about the uncertainty. Of course, all of us are feeling a bit of uncertainty from what's just happening in the world. So he's talking about the uncertainty, and then he said, well, and this is a very intelligent man, it was sort of impressive, very articulate man. He said, I'm starting to believe, and my son and I are planning. He just bought a 47-acre farm, and we're going to be able to plant our own food. And about a year and a half, I'm going to move out there. The whole family's going to move out there. And he said, you should see the weapons we have. Okay. He said, because we're just afraid. I said, afraid of what? Just the whole thing's going to collapse, and everybody's going to be killing each other, and we're going to be in our fortress. And here was he was a reasonable man. This wasn't some, guy that was just crazy. And he said, that's the way the world's going to be, and we're going to have to go hide out. It made me think, that uncertainty. None of us know, because we do live in uncertain times. If someone says to you, what is the world going to be like in 6 months? I don't know. It was interesting. Just at church in Murfreesboro last week, a group of people standing around, and someone asked that question. And about half the people, about a third of them said, I think by next summer this will all be sort of blown over and we'll be getting back to normal. The other third said, by next summer, the whole world's going to be in a mess and confusion, and this is going to be 10 times worse. And about a third of the people were saying, I don't know, I'm just scared. It is uncertain. And it made me start thinking about how are we supposed to deal with uncertainty? Because I tell you what happens with human beings. We don't like uncertainty. When you turn on the water faucet, you expect water. When nothing comes out, there's panic, right? There's uncertainty. Where's the water? What's going to happen next? Where am I going to get water from? Why isn't there water? Is that happening to everybody in the neighborhood? All these things go through your head because of the uncertainty. We are starting to see something in the United States, though. Is we're starting to see people break down emotionally, mentally, and unfortunately even spiritually because of uncertainty. What's going to happen next? What bad thing's going to happen next? So I want to talk about uncertainty. Living in a world of uncertainty, but I'm not going to talk about surviving an uncertain world. I'm going to talk about how we can thrive in an uncertain world. We can actually live life with joy and with excitement and purpose, even in an uncertain world. We have people in this congregation in Murfreesboro that have lost their jobs or may lose their jobs in the next couple of months. They've already been told, if things don't get better, you're not going to have a job. We have people worrying about, when the next meal is going to come from. That's uncertainty. What are we going to do? How am I going to take care of my kids? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with uncertainty in a world that's going to become less and less certain? The main problem with uncertainty and what it produces in us is a feeling that we've lost control. Every human being needs a certain amount of control, right? If not, you'd feel like you're living in a prison. I have to have some choices. I have to have some control over my life. The more uncertain life is, the more we begin to feel like I have no control. And we begin to break down. It's interesting. I read an article this week as I started to think about this sermon from The Guardian, which is a newspaper in England. And in The Guardian, I read a report on some researchers who had done studies on uncertainty and the stress that it causes, and how literally people can have emotional and mental breakdowns because of the stress of, I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what's going to happen to me next. I don't know what's going to happen to my country next. I don't know what's going to happen to my kids next. And so that uncertainty creates a stress. They did say that in their testing and what they had done, the research, there was one group of people that actually thrived in uncertainty. Professional gamblers. They like the fact, if you're a professional gambler, you like the fact that you really don't know what's going to happen next, because somehow they believe the next hand is mine, or the next slot is mine. So they said that's why people can become addicted to gambling, because they sort of get this adrenaline rush out of the uncertainty of it. But for most of us, uncertainty is uncomfortable. And part of it is, I have no control over what's happening to me. They give a perfect example, the researchers did, of uncertainty and its effects on us. And this is one we all could probably associate with to one degree or another. You have an important meeting. You're going to buy a car. You're going to sell a house. You have an important business meeting. You have an interview for a job. But it's very important you get there. So you get up, you leave plenty early, you know that it's going to work out good. You know once you're there, it's all going to work out good. There's no traffic, you drive, you feel real good. The closer you get, the more excited you get about being there. And it's actually a very good experience as you go to your important meeting. Now what happens if you get up early and you get ready and you're driving in your car and you're halfway there and you see a wreck in front of you? And suddenly you're stuck in traffic. And you watch this traffic back up and you turn on the radio and you realize you're going to be stuck there for 2 hours. Well, the anxiety is almost overwhelming. Oh, my meeting. Have you ever seen somebody stuck in traffic and the door opens and they've got their phone out and they're walking up and down between the cars and you can tell they're just screaming. They're just frustrated because they have some important meeting they're supposed to go to and they can't get there. And they're overwhelmed by it. And of course, you sit there and, you can have a breakdown. People start screaming and hollering, beeping the horn, crying. Other people become very calm because it's like, well, I have no control now. And they just sort of give up. They're just sitting there defeated. That's it. I'll never make the meeting. They said there's a third thing that can happen. And that is the traffic's heavy, but you have maybe a 50% chance of getting there. And suddenly you're a NASCAR driver. It's amazing, the research showed, the amount of what people will do if they have a chance. If I can make it, you're racing through the traffic, you're breaking the law, you're doing all kinds of stuff because you think you can get there as you look at your watch. I can make it. And they're being driven to get there. Now, what's interesting in all these scenarios is that they were all really uncertain the moment the person left the house. Every one of them was uncertain. But we're reacting, what they're showing is how people react to uncertainty. Because the truth is, life is uncertain. Life is uncertain. We live in an uncertain time, but there's been a lot worse times. And there will be worse times. Remember, all of us do need to feel some control. Because if we don't, we feel like we're in a prison, right? Now, there's a subject here I'm not going to really touch on because there's another issue here. And that is the person who is what we call control freak. We've all known them, right? They have a compulsive need to control everything. They're always unhappy. They're always negative about every decision made by anybody. Everything has to be done their way. And they're always trying to control everybody. That's a whole other subject because that's a different problem than what we're talking about here. Okay, what we're talking about here is the normal human need to have some control over our lives and how that affects us when we live in an uncertain time where we really don't know. I mean, in the announcements, we're talking about the Feast of Tabernacles. I realized until last week, we didn't even know where most of our feast sites were going to be. And many of those had been originally set up a year ago. We are going to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. God says to. We're going to do it. But where we were going to do it, we weren't sure. And we still don't know whether some of those sites will be there or not. We don't. We don't know what regulations will be there. We will go and we will adhere to the regulations, but it's still uncertain. And that's sort of uncomfortable, isn't it? And we like to know what we're going to do. We like to plan things out. But we live in a world of uncertainty. Now, in this stress that's caused from uncertainty, I don't know what's going to happen next. We end up creating between each other conflicts and competitions. You say, well, why would we do that? I want you to think about it. We have 60, maybe 70 people in the room. And by the way, for all those on the webcast that aren't able to make it because 35, 40% of the people aren't able to be here every week, I want to tell you hi today. But say you had 100 people in a room, and everybody feels a need to have some control. How long is a group of 100 people without purpose, without some kind of biblical reasoning, without God involved, without Christ involved, how long will it take before they start disagreeing with each other about decisions that are made and who's really in control? There's conflict all the time. Conflict in business, conflict between husband and wife, competition all the time because who is going to be in control? Because if I'm in control, I can be happy. I feel secure. If I'm in control, I feel happy, I'm secure. But what if everybody else feels the same way? Which, to one degree or another, every human being needs some control or some security to be happy. So that automatically puts us in conflict with each other. And that gets very complicated in the way that we have conflict with each other. But we have to understand that core need we have for some kind of control. That I'm just not a puppet here, that other people or other things or situations are just using me in all the time. I have to have some control. We're going to look at a passage in the Bible. It has to be one of the most bizarre competitions that you could ever read about. Okay, let's go to Genesis 30. Genesis 30. Because there's a lot of reasons for this. There's actually a lot of understanding of human nature in this passage, but I want to zero in on one point, okay? Jacob, we know the story of Jacob. He got tricked into marrying Leah, and so he married Leah. He really wanted to marry Rachel, who was the love of his life, and finally the father said, okay, you can have her too, but you're going to work for me another 7 years. So he ended up working for 14 years, and he ends up with 2 wives. 2 wives who are sisters. Now, anyone with common sense would know this can't turn out well, okay? 2 wives, 2 sisters. So let's pick this up here in verse 1. Now when Rachel, of course, she's the oldest, she's the second wife, she's the youngest. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. There's a reality here that we can't make fun of what she's saying here. We have to understand. You have to put yourself in her shoes. She lives in a society where the value of the society is based on the family. And a woman's value is in bearing children, raising children, and being in charge of the family. We know that even the servants would report sometimes to the woman. So she was important if they had servants. So this idea, and of course, remember, all of Israel is set up on everybody has property. Everybody has property. So everybody, even if you're the poorest person, you have property, and having children, raising children, this is how a woman is valued. She can't have children. How she looks at herself is, I'm a failure. When she said, if I can't have children, I want to die, this goes to the core of how she sees herself. Now, Jacob says something here that's the real problem. He goes right to the heart of the real problem in verse 2. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Now, he got a little angry here. She must have been really, harping away at this over a period of time. And finally, Jacob says, I can't do this. This is God's prerogative. Now, this is where he made his point. Okay? I know you feel like you have no control, but I don't have any either, Jacob says. I can't make you have children. Because Leah had children, so it wasn't him. That was the problem. And he says it is God that is the issue. Now, the hardest thing to do at this point is give up control. That's Rachel going to God and saying, I implore you for a child. But here's the uncertainty behind that. What if God says no? See, when you and I go to God, we're not we can't go to God and say, God, please heal me, and know that at that moment he's going to heal you. Because sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't, and we have to trust that that's his prerogative. And that's uncertain, isn't it? God, I lost a job. I don't know how I'm going to feed the kids. Give me a job tomorrow. And it's a month later, and you don't have a job. And you say, but God, I asked for a job. Now there's this uncertainty as you're waiting for God to do what God's going to do. Rachel never went that route. She immediately grabbed control. But I can understand. If you understand how that woman felt, she needed emotionally. Here's the problem. Need for control is a feeling. Everything, it's easier to deal with thoughts. We can lay thoughts out and see what the problem is. Laying out a feeling is really difficult, isn't it? Laying out and understanding and discussing a feeling is really difficult. The need for control is a feeling. That's why if you have ever worked for a control freak, they drive you crazy, don't they? But they need it. They need to feel in control. Rachel now decides to take control. Here's what she does. So she said, verse 3, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her, she will bear a child on my knees, and that I may also have a child by her." Now remember, this isn't some crazy thing. This is an ancient custom. When a woman could not have a child, then what would happen is if she had a servant, she could say and arrange, now the servant had a choice whether to do this or not, but the servant would become another wife, but that child would belong to her. So when she said it would come upon my knees, she would actually catch the child as it came out, and it would be her child. It wouldn't be the servant's child. It'd be her child. This is the only way they could deal with infertility in the ancient world. And remember, they would think artificial insemination, which we're used to, they would think that's barbaric. That's so unnatural. That would be beyond their conception. And there's things that we take for granted that these people would think were insane. So don't judge them too harshly, because they would look at us as being really strange. So she says, look, I can't have any children. I've got to have children, so have one through my servant, my handmaid. So she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as a wife, and Jacob went in to her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged my case. He's also heard my voice and given me a son. And so she called him Dan. And she says, this is working out good. You know, Leah's had 4. I now have 1. So she says, take my maid again and have another baby. And so Jacob does. Now she has 2 children. She's got control, right? Well, not in Leah's mind. Leah says, you want competition, okay? You're not going to, hey, I am a better woman than you. I've had 4 kids, okay? So here's what she does. Verse 9. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob to be his wife. This is the weirdest competition I've ever seen. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. And then she said, here, take her again. I got to keep up with Rachel. And so she has another son. Now she has 6-2. She's winning this battle. Jacob, now both of these women are fighting for control. Jacob seems to have control over nothing. He's a pawn here. What I call the stud wars, okay? That's all he is. What happens next? Verse 14. Now Reuben went into the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your mandrakes. But she said to her, it's a small matter that you have taken away my husband. Would you also take away my son's mandrakes? And Rachel said, well, okay. Therefore, he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. So Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, hey, you're mine tonight. I gave some fruit for you, okay? They're bartering fruit for their husband. Now, this has not got to make Jacob, you know, his male ego hasn't got to be really great right now. So how many mandrakes am I worth? Gentlemen, anyone that thinks, boy, it'd be really, really cool to have 2 wives, yeah. It goes on and on and on until finally God says, look, Rachel, I was going to give you a child anyways, and she has a couple children. God was in control all the time, but Rachel decided to take control. And of course, when you take control, you're in conflict. She's in conflict with Leah. Leah being her sister, it's like, nope, I can produce more children than you can. And they got into competition. And that's how Jacob ended up with 12 sons. It's funny. God puts it in there for a reason. It shows us human nature, okay? It shows us human nature. But it also, and there's a lot of things we can learn from this about jealousy, but here we have, I'm going to control this. God, Jacob's son, God is the one who has to control this situation. And Rachel says, no, I will. I will control it. Because I feel like I will die if I don't. And what happens is this strange competition. I don't know. I think Jacob's probably saying, guys, let's just go hunting or something. I got to get away from my wives, How do we deal with situations that we can't really control? Or when we try to control, we make it worse. And this, we're going to get in now to spiritual things. Well, what did Rachel miss? What did Rachel miss? Many years ago, Kim and I were with two friends of ours. We had gone to Big Sandy, Texas. And he had a plane. He was a pilot, and he worked for a company, and they let him use their plane. And so we had gone up. I forgot how we got there. I think we drove up. But he said, let's fly back. And I don't remember why. We did have a car. I have to ask him. She'll probably remember. And so we were going to fly back. And he took off, and we got up in the air, and he said, here, you fly. Now, there's four of us. The two women are in the back. He's in the pilot seat. I'm in the co-pilot seat. And I'm, a little nervous here. But he says, no, go ahead and take it. So I take it. He shows me how to use the rudders. And he's giving me instructions. And I'm flying this plane. Sort of. What I enjoyed was Kim was in the back seat. But since she had never flown a plane, she couldn't say anything. In the car, she could say something, but she couldn't say anything. So she later said, I was scared to death the whole time. So I'm flying. I'm watching the instruments. I'm keeping it. I don't know. We take off. I know you have to go south from that part of Texas to go to Houston, but I have no idea where south is. We just took off and flew around away. Which way is south? I don't know. So, okay, you have to look at the instruments. You have to figure out where south is. You have to be a certain thousands of feet because there's other planes up there. You don't want two planes going in opposite directions at 10,000 feet on the exact same path, right? They're going to crash. So you have to make sure, they tell you where to go, where high you are. You get a certain speed. You got to watch that speed. You got to watch. Anybody here a pilot? Okay, always a pilot. It's sort of complicated. They all say it's not. It's complicated. And you're watching in the horizon. And I got this down. After a couple hours, I started to feel like, okay, I'm okay. And then the sun went down. Now, flying at night, it's a whole new ballgame, okay? So now I'm coming in to Houston. Now, he's been giving me instructions. He's sitting in the pilot seat. He can take control whenever, but he's let me have control of this. And we're flying along, and it's night, and there are different airports, so he's calling in on the radio, and they're talking in language I don't even know what they're saying, practically, because they're using all these codes and so forth. And he brings us this runway, and there it is, the lights and the runway, and I'm coming in, and he's telling me how to land it. And there's a point I realized, and I felt this panic. This isn't going to work. You have to hit the runway in that little plane at about 70 miles an hour. You know what it's like to dive at the ground at 70 miles an hour? And I'm coming in, and there's no way I'm going to hit that at the exact angle I have to hit it. And there's no way I'm going to hit it at 70 miles an hour. And suddenly he reaches over, takes controls, does something with the flaps, brings the nose up, brings it down, and lands it. He said, yeah, I had to take control. You were about to stall. I said, well, what would have happened if I stalled? He said, the nose would have gone down and we would have plummeted and crashed into the ground at 70 miles an hour. He said, but I wasn't going to let you do it. He says, I was going to take control before that ever happened. I learned a little bit from that trip. I tell you what, when he took control, that was the happiest I've ever been in my life, except maybe the day I was married. Because, well, no, when the children were born. Okay, it wasn't the happiest day of my life. But I can tell you, I was relieved. I was relieved because I knew I can't land it. I can't. I don't have the abilities or the knowledge or the know-how or the power. I can't land it. I was never so happy to give up the controls to the pilot who knew what he was doing. Remember, I've said many times that the grace of God is when he gives you something you can't do yourself. Grace just means favor. So he gives you something you can't do yourself. We talk about the grace of God through Christ. You can't pay for your own sins, except if you want to die, eternal death. Only that grace, only that something he does that we can't do, gives us the ability to do this. You and I can't land this plane, your life. You may fly it with a certain amount of control. The only way it works is if the pilot is sitting next to you, watching everything you do and adjusting when you do something wrong, just like he did. But you can't land it. You don't have the power to bring this life in to the focal point where God's taking it. None of us do. I have my logbook here, pilot logbook. I have 2.8 hours of flight training. It takes 40 to become a pilot. So maybe when I retire, I'll go become a pilot, Fill out my logbook. But I knew I can't do this. He knew I couldn't do it. He took me as far as I could go, and then he took control. We're going to look at a scripture of a man who figured this out in the Bible, who figured out what I'm talking about here. Rachel didn't figure it out. God worked it out anyways. This man figured it out. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 12. There is a point in all this where, first of all, you have to have the pilot in the plane with you. And second of all, when you reach the destination that only he knows where it is. I had no idea how to get to Houston. I couldn't have flown that plane into Houston. Okay, just head south. Okay. Fly till you hit the Gulf of Mexico. I don't know. I don't know how to get to Houston. I don't know which airport to come to. I don't know which runway to do. I don't know how to land the plane. Spiritually speaking, with God, what God's doing in our lives, we don't either. In other words, it's all uncertainty unless we have the pilot telling us what to do, and unless there's times we take our hands off the controls. We let go of the wheel. Notice what Paul says. 2 Corinthians 12. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Now this is very interesting. He even says it twice to make sure we understand. He says, I have a physical problem. We don't know what it is. There's been much speculation of what it was. Some expect it may have been malaria. He had traveled through areas in what is modern-day Turkey where there was a lot of malaria at the time because of swamps. If he had malaria, that's a reoccurring thing. It's just debilitating when you get it. We know he had bad eyesight. He talks about that. So whatever this is, it's debilitating to him. And to the point he says, Satan has caused this in my life, this physical problem, this thorn in the flesh, okay? So whatever this is, he didn't say what it was. Whatever it is really hard on him. And he believed God was going to heal him. And 3 times he went. And he was uncertain because, well, God, you say you heal. You say you heal. Why aren't you healing me? And then he comes to this conclusion. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times, that it might depart from me. And he said to me, God gave him an answer. My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. All of a sudden, he was very, very certain. But you understand what his certainty is. God is not going to heal me. He's now certain. The uncertainty is gone. Is he going to heal me? He's not going to heal me. I don't understand. I have faith. Now, he has absolute faith. God's not going to heal me. And you know why? He said, because I realized something. Through me, God has done all these miracles, he says, and he's preached all these sermons. And you think of all the things Paul did. Changed the church. Spread the gospel to the Gentiles all throughout the Roman Empire. This man was used by God in one of the most dramatic ways in all the New Testament. And he said, I started to realize this is God's way of saying, remember who's doing it. Remember what I do for you that you can't do for yourself, that's enough. What I do for you, God says, that you can't do for yourself, that's enough. Because I'm doing it all through you. All the miracles, Paul didn't do a miracle, God did the miracles. Christ was working with him. Christ was with him all the time. Then he says something that I'm gonna just tell you. I'm not to this point yet. Paul says, therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, and persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Wow, when I am weak, I am strong. Yes, why? Because God's grace is enough. God given me what I can't have on my own. Wow. That's enough. In other words, what Paul had done is he realized he could not land the plane. And he took his hands off the controls. He couldn't land it. This is one of the most difficult things we deal with but that means uncertainty. What if God says they won't heal you? I don't want that. I'll just ask 100 times. Right? I'll just ask 100 times. But what if God sooner or later tells you, no, what I do for you is enough. And I'm not taking this trial away. All the time I anoint somebody who's sick, or I go home from the hospital, and I go to God and say, I don't understand. Why is this person suffering? And the answer I always get is, son, it's not really your business. I'm taking care of this person. You have to believe that. If I don't believe it, I can't anoint anybody again, because why would I anoint somebody if I didn't believe God was going to do something? So you're doing something here. We have to believe that. But you say, well, that's uncertain. Yes. We're going to talk a little bit about what we can be certain about, okay? The certainty comes from saying, I can't fly the plane. God teaches me, he tells me, I get through life going all over the place, wings tipping and rocking, and it's hard to keep that plane level, unless you're really good at it. I mean, I suppose after 40 hours, you're probably pretty good at it. But I'll tell you, that first 30 minutes, if you go far, you roll it if you go far enough. You don't want to roll a plane, okay? Not unless you know what you're doing. So, Paul had come to the realization that he had to give it up. He had to listen and listen and listen, be guided, do what he was told to do, and then at some point give it up. Now here's what is this. This is counterintuitive, what I'm going to say next. The need to have control over everything creates frustration and creates stress. It creates competition and conflict because, well, I need control, you need control, I need control more than you do. No, I need control more than you do. How many conflicts between husband and wife is caused by a need to control? Both very much needing to control for security. But if you give in, I lose my security. Well, if I give in, I lose my security. But here's what happens. If you don't give up control to God, and that means you have to say, okay, I follow, and sometimes I simply accept your grace is enough. What you do for me is enough, and I don't get everything I want. If we don't do that, we actually lose control. I'll show you what I mean. Matthew 24. Part of the Olivet prophecy given by Jesus, Matthew 24. Verse 45. A well-known parable of Jesus. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly, I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. So here he's just talking about servants. These are two classifications of servants. This isn't about Christian and non-Christian. This is about followers of Jesus Christ. And this first group, it's servants who just do. They just do. They're told and they fly as their lives are based on what God tells them to do. And when God says, let go now, they let go now. Not easy, is it? By the way, we all struggle with this. Every one of us struggles with letting go at times. I don't want to. If I let go, this isn't going to turn out well, right? If I let go, I don't know what's going to happen. But there's times you have to. The next group here is the evil servant. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming. Now that's real important because we know the motivation. The motivation is, my master isn't coming back. He doesn't even see the runway. He doesn't know where you land anymore. There's no purpose for being in the plane. He's not going anyplace. He's not going anyplace. He doesn't see where it's going. And so here's what happens. And begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards. Two things. It's a servant. This servant starts to beat and misuse and abuse other servants. That's what Mr. Luck was talking about. This world's getting crazy. I mean, who even knows anymore any information about the COVID-19, what's true and what's not true? I mean, I've been telling everybody, let's try to stay 6 feet apart. I've been trying. We're not doing it very well, but we're trying, okay? Well, now, what did the big health organizations just came out and said, well, probably 3 feet's all right. Well, sneeze goes farther than 3 feet. So 6 feet didn't make sense to me. 3 feet doesn't make sense to me. But now, I guess we get to pick which health organization we want to follow. It's just, it's driving everybody crazy. right? Everything is crazy. I was talking to a man from Canada this week. He's in the United Church of God up there, and he did make a comment. I think he sort of prefaced it like he didn't want to offend me or anything, but basically, and this isn't exactly what he said, but take out all the nuances. He basically said, are all the politicians in your country crazy? Basically, yeah. Basically, yes. We can't beat each other, okay? We have to be beyond that. We have to be beyond that. And they eat and drink with the drunkards. In other words, they just, lifestyles. Oh yeah, they might come to church, but the misuse of alcohol is there. Partying is there. Sexual lifestyles that we shouldn't have as Christians is there. And he says, that's what happens here. Lose sight of the runway. They don't even know who's flying the plane anymore. They think they're doing it themselves. And off they go. He says, now here's what's really scary with this in verse 50. The master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. In other words, he's saying this is a salvation issue, right? Weeping and gnashing of teeth always has to do with the lake of fire. This is a salvation issue where we lose track of the runway. The Lord delays his coming. God isn't our pilot anymore, and we're just living our lives the best we can. You know what? Uncertainty will drive you to do that. Uncertainty will drive you to do that. You know, one of the biggest problems they're having in opening up colleges right now is that these young people have been separated from other young people for a long time. And of course, we're social beings. They can't keep them away from each other, and they can't keep them, social distancing, wearing masks, or anything else. And now they're having all kinds of problems in certain of the colleges. They isolated these kids and then stuck them all together. One person gets it and is passing around. Now, fortunately, most of them are healthy enough. It's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to be a big deal. But, some people are going to die, but it's not going to be like if you're my age, which Fred Kellers keeps reminding me of my age. But, by the way, he had a good turnout at the Bible study Friday night. He had a really good turnout. I was glad to see that. So he'll keep doing it. This Wednesday will be me, and then the following Friday will be him. Every other week, we'll switch off. So, the more you try to control, the more you lose sight of the destination, and the more chance you have of losing control. And I found out it doesn't take much. At 70 miles an hour, coming in from a couple thousand feet, it doesn't take much to crash that plane. So let me sort of start wrapping this up now. And what we can do to just practically begin to deal with all this uncertainty. First of all, we have to get the controls to God. Okay? So that's spiritually what we have to do. What can we do otherwise? Well, first thing is you have to accept what you can control and what you can't control. You can't control the weather. You can't control national politics or natural calamities, or you can't control how other people will react. The reality is, we really don't control much. For the most part, we only control our thoughts, our attitudes, and our decisions. And that's why we have to be close to God so that God is influencing our thoughts and attitudes and decisions. We have to. There's no other way. Because our normal thoughts, attitudes, and decisions will only create more uncertainty. Because if you have control, you're probably creating uncertainty in other people. Because they need control. So some of the things we can do. All right, let's go to Isaiah 62 first. Or I'm sorry, 66. Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66, verse 1. Here's what we have to remember. Thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne, and earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you will build me? Where is the place of my rest? For all those things my hand has made, and all those things exist, says the Lord. God says, first of all, let's put it in perspective. What are you going to do to impress me? In other words, if we're trying to buy God off, we're trying to impress God, he says that won't work. And then he makes this very succinct statement. But on this one will I look, on him who is poor and of a contrite spirit, and who trembles at my word. Simple humility before God that says, take control. Now, that doesn't take away our responsibility to do things ourselves. That's what we're going to talk about. But it does recognize that God ultimately controls us. Well, no, we let him have the control. Because if we don't, we can't land. Because we don't have the power to. We don't have the ability to. So here's some things we need to do. First of all, simplify your life. Make a list of things you can control. Simple things you can control, like declutter your life, okay? Declutter the house and the garage, right? Get rid of things you don't want anymore. Get control of that. You can control that. Get control of your obsession with monetary success. It's so easy for us to get caught up. Now, having money, having a house, having a nice car, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's our goal in life, we're in trouble already. We're in trouble. So what we have to do is get control of that so that we put work in the proper spiritual place. Now, you have to work, by the way. If you don't work, able-bodied people are supposed to work. The Bible says so. But work isn't our God either. Get control of the amount of spiritual amount and quality of your entertainment. Sometimes we can escape from uncertainty by what? Being totally absorbed in entertainment. A little entertainment's good. 6 hours a day of playing video games and 4 hours of watching movies, that's 10 hours a day. That's not good. Get control of your prayer and Bible study time. How in the world are you going to sort of fly this plane if the pilot isn't beside you telling you how to do it? And he tells you how to do it through your prayer and Bible study. Get control of your health. See, you can do that. You can exercise. You can try to eat right. Now, you can't control your health entirely, can you? Let's face it. All of us have genetic things we were born with that you can't fix. Everybody does. And once you get to be a certain age, you realize there's damage you did to your body a long time ago you can't fix either. I can go to God and ask him to fix all the damage I did to myself in my 20s. And the answer is, my grace is sufficient. I just want to be 40 again. Just make me 40 again. My grace is sufficient. Now, he gives me help. But you know what I mean? If you're older than about 29, you know what I mean, right? Prepare to lower your standard of living. What I mean by that is we need to get control of the resources we do have. Set up and live by a budget. Plan to get out of debt. Educate yourself on how to make good decisions when it comes to the money you have. And then this last point actually is the original sermon I was going to give until the electrician changed my mind. I want to talk, what I was going to give the original sermon on was about stresses in the family. But one of the points was we can't let this time of uncertainty cause such stress in our families that it begins to tear our families apart. When you get down to it, physically, God gives us our families and each other in the church. That's all we have. That's all. You can't trust too many other people. You love them, you help them, you work with them, and sometimes you can. You find good people you work with or your neighbor, and they're trustworthy. But you know, you got to be careful, don't you? We have to trust each other, and our families have to be strong. And what happens is, in cases where we're overly stressed, we expect our mate, our husband or our wife, to supply a spiritual strength, a spiritual, to supply a spiritual need that they can't. There are certain needs, emotional needs. I said spiritual, I mean emotional needs. There are certain needs emotionally that a husband gives to a wife and a wife gives to a husband. We're designed that way, right? We're designed to do that. But you know what? You have spiritual needs and emotional needs that only God can fill. And if you demand that your wife or husband fill that, they're going to fail. How can a man fulfill a woman's need that's for God? Or how can a woman fulfill a man's need that's for God? But we try to do that. Like, you're supposed to fix me. You're supposed to help me. You're supposed to comfort me. Well, that's true. But husband and wife can only help each other so much in the way that husbands and wives help each other. They can't help each other in the way that God helps us. And we can put so much stress on the husband-wife relationship in times of uncertainty that we actually turn each other away from each other. You know, I've dealt with situations where a child died, especially an only child. And the couple loves each other, but they never get over it. Because every time they see each other, all they remember is the pain. It is amazing, if you look statistically, how many people that have a child die, especially an only child, and they get divorced. And yet they had a good marriage. They can't live with the pain. Because you're supposed to heal me, I'm supposed to heal you. How can we heal each other? Well, you can't. There's a certain level of pain there only God can heal. Only God can heal that. And then you can help each other. So in these times of uncertainty, you can't demand so much of your husband or wife that you actually drive a wedge between each other. You can't do that. Because your children need you to be strong. Because I tell you what, children absorb whatever emotional state you're in. If you're in anxiety, they're going to wonder, why are they acting up? Because they're feeling your anxiety. They feel our anxiety. That means sometimes if they're old enough, we have to sit down and talk to them. Yeah, it's a difficult time right now. Daddy's out of work. It's a difficult time right now. Mommy and we've been working and we both lost our jobs, but I got a job, so Daddy's going to take care of you for a while. You're used to me taking care of you, but we've had to do all these things. But God is going to take care of us. He's the pilot of our plane. You have to tell them that. You have to pray with them. But I'm afraid if I go outside, will I die? I've heard children say the fears that they're feeling. I think I told you about my 8-year-old granddaughter. Said, Grandpa, I have a story I'm writing. It's a mystery story. It's about how all the children have to stay inside because outside there's a murderer that's hunting them down and nobody knows who he is. It didn't take much discussion to find out she was scared to death of this disease that's out there. So the children have to stay inside because there's murderers out there. They're stressed out because they hear us talk about it. They feel what we're going through. We need to talk to them. We need to calm them down. They need security. That, first of all, no, there's bad things in the world. No, we're not hiding it from you. But we're okay. We're together. Our family sticks together because God's in our family. We believe in Jesus Christ, and He's right here with us. That's what the truth. That's why. So we're okay. And they need to hear it. So that was just one point of the sermon that you were supposed to get. But you can thank my electrician. It's amazing how we read these stories, we're inspired by these stories in the Bible about people who faced uncertainty, and wow, we're inspired by it. We just don't want to live their lives, right? Oh, we're inspired by this, but I'm sure glad I don't have to live like that. Everybody lives to a certain degree because all of human life in this world is filled with uncertainty. And God doesn't always promise to tell you or me what he's doing right now. He only promises we all land. We all get where we're supposed to go. That's all he promises us. We don't always understand what he's doing. We can have certainty, though. We can have certainty that the Almighty God is involved in your life, that you matter, that he cares. We have certainty about his plan to save humanity. And we can have certainty that he's made promises to us that he will keep. Those promises are certain, and he's made them. God is sitting right there beside you in the pilot seat. All these instruments are going to tell you what's going on, even though you don't understand them half the time. He's going to tell you what to do. He's going to guide you. But remember, you can't reach the final destination. Only he can. You can't land the plane. And until we realize that and give up the controls, we'll keep trying to do something we can't do. We have to understand that there's a time, like Paul said, okay, I get it. What you give me that I can't have myself is enough. And at that point, you can look at the pilot and let go of the controls.